Hello everyone and welcome back to Be Like Christ for an exciting day. We're starting a brand new book today. It is the book of Numbers, which I feel like probably doesn't get all that much attention, probably because it's on the other side of Leviticus and a lot of people give up in Leviticus. Numbers, though, is going to prove to be an interesting book, so I'm glad you're here. If this is your first time doing one of these studies, we do them every day, Lord willing. We've succeeded so far for about 3 months. And the goal is to cover an overview, a summary of a chapter of the Bible in roughly 5 minutes. Today is the introduction to a new book, so it's always longer than 5 minutes, but we try to keep them at 5 minutes as best as we can. There's PDFs like the one that you're going to see up on the screen, this illustrated outline. You can download all these for free on our website at tobelikechrist.com. That's thanks to our patrons and the people that support us. So thank you, and leave a thank you down in the comments to them if you're somebody who's benefited from that. And let's see. Yeah, basically these outlines seek to cover the characters of each chapter, when on a timeline these events happened, where they happened, and then just to give a summarized outline of the main events, things that are discussed in the chapter, and then to draw an application that we can use in our own lives and take something away and apply it into our daily living. So that's the goal. Today we are starting the book of Numbers. Thanks for joining us in Numbers chapter 1, and let's get started. In terms of our characters for this chapter, they're pretty much the same guys we've been talking about throughout Exodus and Leviticus. First up is a group of people, quite a large group of people we'll find out in this chapter, the Israelites or the Hebrews. These were the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that we read about back in the book of Genesis. And God granted them freedom from their slavery in Egypt, where they had been slaves for several hundred years, back in the book of Exodus. Now they're wandering through the wilderness on their way to Canaan, which is the land that God has promised to give them as a home. Next up, Moses. Moses was God's selected man to lead the Israelites out of Egypt and to lead them to Canaan, or the Promised Land. God spoke directly to Moses and gave him his instructions and his laws, and then Moses would communicate God's words to the people, so he was kind of like a liaison. And then our last main character in this chapter is Aaron. Aaron was Moses' brother. He was from the tribe of Levi, as was Moses, and Aaron was selected by God to be the high priest of all of the Israelites. Now, thinking about a timeline, when did these events happen? We left off about 1490 BC back in the book of Leviticus. Well, guess what? We're picking up pretty much in the same spot. Maybe a little bit of time has passed. The very first verse of the book of Numbers tells us when these events took place. The events we're going to read about started on the second month of the second year after Israel had left Egypt. So we're in approximately 1490 to 1489 BC. Remember, BC time moves backwards. So this is just about a year after the Israelites left Egypt. A year and 2 weeks, roughly. It's easy to think about all the Bible books covering roughly the same amount of time, but that's actually not the case at all. So for the book of Leviticus, basically everything in the book of Leviticus, all the rules that are given in that book, they were given in about a month's worth of time. Numbers, on the other hand, is going to cover roughly 40 years worth of time, so covering a lot more ground. And then we move over to our map and talk about where these events took place. According to the book of Leviticus and to Numbers chapter 3, verse 1, the Israelites were camped in the wilderness of Sinai, very near to Mount Sinai. And you can see the traditional location of Mount Sinai down on the map, sitting right in the fork of the Red Sea. So hopefully before you do these outlines, you read the chapter for yourself first. And if you did that, you'll notice that this is quite a long chapter, but can actually be summarized quite concisely because there's a lot of repetitious language in this chapter that we can condense down. So the first section is actually the first 46 verses. God calls for a census of the fighting men of Israel. So on the first day of the second month, a little over a year after the Israelites got out of Egypt, God told Moses to take a census of the men of Israel. Now, this census was specific to men who were over 20 years old and who were, quote, able to go to war. So not everybody, just kind of older adult men who were healthy, apparently. 12 men one from each tribe. These men were the chiefs of their families. They were selected to help Moses and Aaron, and you can read all their names in the text, but I haven't listed them here. Now, the census was completed, and the total numbers are given to us, so that's what I'll read to you next. So from the tribe of Reuben, there were 46,500 people. Simeon, 59,300. Gad, 45,650. Judah, 74,600. Judah was the biggest tribe. Issachar, 54,400. Zebulun, 57,400. Ephraim, 40,500. Manasseh, 32,200. Benjamin, 35,400. Dan, 62,700. Asher, 41,500. And Naphtali, 53,400. Hopefully I got all those right. The total number, and I did do the math, I think I got them right. The total number of all of the men in Israel who were over 20 years old and able to go to war, 603,550. So this is quite a large nation at this point. Now that's the majority of the chapter, but we've got one other section, verses 47 through 54, the exemption for the Levites. Now, the men of the tribe of Levi, you'll notice they're not in that list. They were excluded from the census because God had a special purpose for them. The Levites were to take care of the tabernacle, the holy tent of God's presence. We talked about the tabernacle a lot in Leviticus and a lot in the book of Exodus, so no need to rehash all that here. The Levites were responsible for transporting the tabernacle and its furnishings when God directed the Israelites to break camp and to move somewhere else. They were also instructed to camp around the tabernacle when they set up their tents because they were responsible for protecting it and guarding it. Now, as we always do, let's finish off with an application. The book of Numbers begins by telling us that Israel had grown into a sizable nation with quite a large fighting force. Their size was the result of God's blessing on their nation. God had promised Abraham, who lived several hundred years before this, he was the father of the Israelites. God had promised him that he was going to make him and his family a great nation. He did that, remember, through his son Isaac and then his son Jacob. The fulfillment of this promise should have given the Hebrews confidence that God was with them, that he would fulfill his other promises to them, like giving them the land of Canaan, even though it was inhabited by other nations at that current time. Now, we'll find out as we read the book of Numbers and into some of the other books whether or not they really did have confidence in God, but that's for the future. But an application for us is that we ought to look back at our lives and to see the times that God has kept his promises and to remind ourselves of those times and to let those memories embolden us to move confidently into the future, knowing that God will help us to overcome the challenges that are ahead of us. He's always helped us in the past. He's always been faithful, always kept his promises. We can bank on that in the future as well.